Back, ladies and gentlemen. What episode number are we?
38.
Are
And
we
we're on
sure?
question 91, so we're almost on 100 out of a million questions, which is
We're
huge.
getting there, guys. We're getting there. Do we think we will get to 100 episodes by the halvening? We got 69 days.
Oh, we'll absolutely get to 100 episodes by the halving.
What I read something recently, so I did some math. So I saw in a blog report. Oh, by the way, this show is called Bitcoin Q&A. In case the three people watching weren't aware. I saw something recently though that said that we are 21,000 blocks away from the next halving.
Super exciting. Yeah, I haven't checked recently what the 10-minute projection is. Let's have a look here. Looks like April 23rd. I know people are excited because what might happen is you get like this palindrome where we hit it on 420. So April 20th, the halving could occur if we get a little more hash rate online here, and we can get that block time down to 9 minutes and 50 seconds.
I am going to get so uncomfortably high if the halving is on 420.
Like we'll have to do a show. We could do it. We could do it on a show.
I'm talking like, do you remember 420 when we were both at BM and I took the mushrooms?
I don't. It must have been great.
The issue was,
I do remember that actually. We had a show. We had
a show. I smoked before. Like we intentionally were like, let's get high before the show. And I wanted to keep smoking, but I was at my parents' house, so I couldn't smoke inside the house. And so, but the best alternative I can come up with is I'm going to take some mushrooms right now.
I remember that because the show is early in the morning, and then later in the workday, we just kind of realized like we're kind of useless right now. There's a lot of stuff to do. We did this too early.
Someone asked me to do something, and I was like, tomorrow.
Yeah, let's do it tomorrow. It's a national holiday. If you weren't aware,
this is a religious and spiritual holiday for me. So, according to the First Amendment, I have the right to exercise that. Honestly, this triggered a core memory. Now, all of a sudden, this idea that like holidays are all made up. But I remember one time, like in my past life, I asked to leave work early, not to have work off, just literally leave work 2 hours early to go home and have dinner with my family on the Persian New Year. And my boss literally was like, go celebrate your made up holiday. And this is like a devout Jewish woman who celebrates every Jewish holiday. And I was like, oh yeah, because Jewish holidays are not made up too, right? Like we could literally just arguably make up holidays and justifiably say, well, based on my religious beliefs, this is a moment where I'm supposed to spend with. Like honestly, when I have kids one day,
that's what the Europeans do.
I'm not going to tell them what 420 is. Like I'm not going to say, hey, we're celebrating this because like your dad was a stoner and still probably is. But I'm going to take my kids out of school. It's a family holiday. Like this is too important of a day. Like
let's back up. You're going to put your kids in the public school system?
No, I'm going to be rich enough that they're in private school.
Yeah, my kids are going to be in a pod. Okay, I just learned about this the other day, actually. It makes a lot of sense, but if you start your own
learning pod,
I think it's called a pod, like like a small homeschooling. There's services now. This is actually a really incredible business where you can go type in your jurisdiction, find other people that are kind of like-minded and want to help like raising and teaching their kids. You can sort all that out. But you can get like a $10,000 coupon for the government to go try out different private schools and even like charter your own. I think it was like $10,000, dude. It's a lot because you're paying taxes to attend the public school. But if you opt out and more states are adopting this, so you can get this coupon to, go fund the first, I don't know, a couple months of a teacher's salary, or like, I mean, just think about how much further that money goes on the free market than when you're just like tossing those taxes into the private black hole public education system.
Just describe it. It's called school choice. I mean, it's been something that candidly conservatives and people on the right have been asking for a long time. Like I kind of actually weirdly do support that. Um,
Yeah.
the arguments against it of like then like a lot of the public schools get left behind, this, that, or the other. My response is, what is the result of our current public school system right now, and like what do we see right now? And to be honest, like I have some friends who are teachers.
Mhm.
The number one complaint is always like, dude, they don't make enough money, especially for like the value added to our society of the work that they do.
Mhm.
This actually presents an opportunity for the best teachers to get paid accordingly. Because right now it's a tenured position. Hey, I've been a teacher for 15 years, so I make more than a teacher for 5 years, but the teacher for 5 years could actually have better results, whether it's measured through how many students are graduating, whether it's measured through state sponsored tests, whether it's measured through how much they make 10 years down the line, whatever or 5 years down the line, whatever the measurement is. Like there are teachers who are younger at their job who are performing better, but just make less because that's the way the pay structure is designed there.
Yeah, I was a teacher before COVID, not a fully fledged teacher, but I was like in the in between space. So I was in a school, hired full time out of school. I was like the lowest tier teacher you could get. So I would go basically work with the dean to like help the kids that were getting thrown out of class every day. Like, all right, you brought a gun to school today. Why did you do that? All right, let's go play basketball. Like, it's just like a crazy, crazy job, dude. Like, they had a padded room that they would toss these kids that were just like too violent during the day, but they had orders from their parents like, you can't call the cops on my kid. So the school's like, okay. So they just like throw them in this room, dude, to calm down. Like these kids were breaking like desk legs off of desks and just like destroying the classroom. Like really, really disturbing shit. But the other side of that is like, yes, teachers aren't paid well, but for the teachers, that is the most money they've ever made in their life in most cases. It's their first like legitimate job. They're coming saddled with like 50 to 100 grand in debt. And they're just like, yes, I've made it. I'm
But
going to lord over these little kids.
I don't like that argument because you can literally apply that argument. It doesn't stop at teachers. What you're really arguing is we can pay first time workers in their early 20s, workers in their late teens, workers in their 20s, period.
Yeah.
Just pay them pittances because this is their first job. And
Yeah.
like that is the inherent flaw in our system right there.
Well, I guess what I would add is like you get what you pay for. Like these are not the
Oh,
most qualified people in many cases to teach your kids. What they're doing is not teaching. It's a lot of propaganda. It's a lot of pre-mapped. I mean, my kids couldn't even like they couldn't tell time, dude. Like they couldn't do anything. They were like utterly addicted to like their cell phones and vapes. And like it's totally anecdotal, but it's just like it's a completely different, like more distractible, more irreverent environment than I grew up in. And it's scary. It's just like government subsidized like propaganda daycare. And I'm not saying there's not great teachers out there, obviously, that are like changing kids' lives and crushing it, but that's the exception. The majority of the rule is like, all right, let's get through this day with no incidents. Let's not gender anybody, and let's get through this little lesson book.
I could
Um,
still point back to like the handful of teachers I had who like genuinely positively impacted my life and like moved it forward for the better.
totally, totally.
And then it's like when you actually sit there and you realize like, well, in high school I had roughly 6 to 7 different teachers a year. So let's keep it conservative. Let's say 25 teachers all throughout high school.
Yeah,
Five of them, five of them I would categorize that, maybe six. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, middle school was the same thing. Elementary school, it was like a couple teachers. And then again, it's like it's even fewer teachers at the younger ages. And then to your point, dude, we teach kids to be employees. It like dawned on me one day when I was getting assigned all this busy work again at my old job, where I was like,
yeah,
it was like school where I'm being assigned work that I don't really care about, that doesn't interest me, that I don't want to do, but I kind of just have to do it to collect my paycheck, to get a good grade and get my mom off my back. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I like really saw that system and how like I had been led into it, and I was like, "Ooh, this sucks. Now I get why, like, there's a
Just
line.
task rabbiting. Yeah.
Well, no, there's a line in the movie The Social Network where when the Winklevoss twins go to the dean of Harvard and they talk about how, like, oh, Mark stole our idea, this, that, or the other. And the dean of Harvard is talking about how, like, look, this is Harvard. We're not teaching you to be employees. We're teaching you guys to be founders. And, like, if you guys say this was your idea, you can go figure out and make another idea. So I thought that was a really telling and very subtle line of, like, the difference between certain, and Harvard's a poor example given the state of where that institution is today right now.
It's
But
just pay to play. Yeah.
by and large, it shows you at least there is a difference. There are some institutions that are sort of regurgitating and teaching an employee. They are teaching you to go beyond that.
Yeah, but like those institutions endowments are so large, dude, that I mean, this is
But
a
you know why?
yeah, of course. This is a super complicated topic, but it's just, there's a problem when you've got like there's like 20 staff per one student at Yale, maybe more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not a university, it's a city. Like it's a fully funded like mafia of professors.
Well, here's an interesting thing. So I'll give Chamath the shout out for, like, explaining this on an episode of the All In podcast. But then, like, I went back and, like, looked at other examples and, like, kind of confirmed what he was saying. But the real reason university endowments have blown up is specifically because students cannot declare bankruptcy on their student loan debt. And why? And this is the thread that you kind of have to follow there. Of if a student declares bankruptcy, now it's assumed that, kind of like what we said, it's a student. They probably never had a job, or if they did, it wasn't like a full-time, high-paying job. It was part-time, maybe an internship, minimum wage, whatever it is. It was a very low-paying job. So they, off the bat, they don't have a lot of assets necessarily. If you're in student loan debt, mommy and daddy didn't fund your college. They're not paying for things. So, like, those types of things are all out the door automatically. So you're essentially graduating with negative balance, not a zero balance. You have nothing to your name and you're just working to get out of the negative. But if you declare bankruptcy, well, the collectors have to come and collect from somewhere. And this time with student loan debt, the collectors are the government. It's not the bank. So it can be a little different and tricky, but the government can actually get to places that banks and collectors necessarily can't. And the government has to point to someone and hold them at fault for, hey, this loan was taken out, but it did not fulfill its obligation. And the only person, or I should say the only institution, in an instance where a student takes out student loan debt under the promise that if you come and get this degree, you will get a high paying job, but they didn't. And as a result, they have to default on that debt. Well, who's actually responsible? It's the university that gave them the degree. And so all of these ballooned freaking oh my God, I'm saying another word right now. Endowments. All of the balloon endowments are a direct result of the student loan debt crisis, and specifically the fact that students cannot declare bankruptcy on it. Because if they could, the clawbacks would be coming out of those endowments. And that is why very specifically, like someone like Elizabeth Warren, who this is weird. Not only is Harvard University, which makes sense, she's from Mass, she used to teach it, they're one of her top donors. But so is the UC school system. And then my favorite one comes in number 20 on her list of top 20 donors, the University of Texas in Austin. The University of Texas is one of Elizabeth Warren's largest donors. Why? Because this is not a woman who preaches, oh, let's declare bankruptcy on student loan debt. Let these kids get out of this debt and, like, build a life. No, let's forgive the debt. Let's forgive the debt because it protects the endowments and it protects her big donors. UT Austin is one of the largest endowments in the world, due in large part because they're drilling for oil on campus. But still, they want to protect that endowment.
Right.
So,
yeah, it makes sense, man. Shout out to Default. There's a Bitcoiner and a bit of a shitcoiner in this space who, at one point in his life, he he was a hacker. He was an anonymous, didn't agree with their ethics, broke up, formed his own hacker groups. But he broke into a university's admin dashboard. He had like a cloud cluster, and like one of the they commandeered it. So one of the networks was university, breaks into the admin dashboard, and he forgave like hundreds of thousands of student loan debt just by fucking deleting it. There were no backup records of it. So these students just all of a sudden had no payments to make, nothing, which is hilarious. I mean, I'm definitely not in the camp where I think that these kids deserve to have their debt forgiven or be bailed out by Biden or anything like that. Like I'm not here trying to subsidize other people's education with my tax dollars. Like that's a choice they made, but I feel for them too, because they were not in a place to make a wise decision there. Like no one is. It's a funnel that if you fall in a certain socioeconomic status, it seems like the only route to take is to take on massive debt, try to get this degree that's going to land you a job that's pays way less than you're being told on your first day.
I was explained this. There are realistically only two ways to move your family up in economic class. First, very obvious, make a
100x leverage.
Make a lot of money. The other way in this country and throughout the better part of modern society, and I would go so far back as to say like even the last like arguably 500 years, maybe not 500 because not a lot of these institutions have been around for that long, but like education. And I'm not necessarily saying you had to go to university, but like getting an education had historically helped you move your family up an economic class. And so that is why there is this weight on an education system. I mean, the idea of tax dollars for giving student loans are not like I'm always open to it, open to admitting the fact that like I stand to benefit if student loan debt is forgiven. Like I've got a certain amount left, like based on what Biden promised last time around, I actually qualified for like the full $20,000 forgiveness, and I would have been out of student loan debt. I literally would have been forgiven. I would have been done. And my argument is always, it's not as though they're not going around forgiving debts. It's not as though this is the only debt that's on the table. It's this was on the table as we're forgiving PPP loans, as we're issuing bailouts to different companies that were dragged down by COVID, as were various other government subsidies that were being offered, just it's and giggles, candidly, like our $1,700 or $1,200 checks that we were being just issued for fun. So,
we got to go back and see what that's worth in Bitcoin now. I haven't checked in a long time.
Do you remember that Twitter account?
Was it a Twitter account? I thought there was a website I used to check because I put all my stimulus checks into Bitcoin, and I'm curious where it's at. Well, it would be up about
$1,200 stimulus is now worth. It was a Twitter account. They have it
1,800, $2,000.
So
it was about 18. Bitcoin was like 18 to 20K when these came out, if I remember. This was early 2020.
Less.
Really?
It was less.
Interesting.
I think it was like
okay. So it was before the bull run. Okay, so you're up like 100%. That's sick,
bro. You're up 500%. If you literally if you put $1,200 on Bitcoin at 7K and Bitcoin's at over 35.
Oh, it was 7K?
Yes.
I thought you said 17.
No.
Whoa.
Okay, it was a sub 10. The first stimulus check was. The first stimulus check was sub 10.
Got it. Okay, so you really hit the bull market. All right, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I gotta dip out a little early today, so let's dig into some of our other stories. Do we want to start first with the advertisers, freedom of speech, Elon?
Sure.
All right, so everyone's probably seen it. Elon had a pretty hilarious, bold video, super interesting one-on-one, like high stakes interview, I guess you'd call it if it was anyone else in that chair. I think it was part of the DealBook conference, but he basically just told advertisers blatantly to go fuck yourself for trying to, as he says, blackmail him, which that terminology I didn't really understand. I mean, they're paying for some value. I mean, they have a right to ask for. I assume they're asking him to make certain moves, but the problem I have with his posturing here, I mean, it was cool to see like kind of base speech. Of course, he really like, shook up mainstream media with it. But X is not a freedom of speech platform. In my opinion, it can never be. This is completely corporate captured, and the pressures on this institution are different. Now, Elon doesn't seem set on running it profitably, which alleviates him certainly from a lot of that pressure, and his general kind of irreverence and kind of like singular attitude in the space as an entrepreneur, just that his like wealth and success has afforded him. I think it alleviates a lot of potential censorship. But the problem is you're on a platform that stores your information, your username and password on, a centralized server that's captured by a corporation that will disenfranchise you in time. So it's not that there's freedom of speech. It's just that he's tailored the speech that's allowed to suit more people than the previous regime. I mean, I think it's safe to say, I mean, I actually haven't looked into this. This would be interesting to check what the user, monthly average users now versus during Jack's reign were. That fluctuates. But I think the people who are there who are aligned with Elon certainly feel like they have freedom of speech. But it's not about your feelings. It's about whether or not you can be disenfranchised by the will of a few, or in this case, maybe just one person. And that's absolutely still the case on Twitter. Accounts are banned all the time. Accounts are shit. Go look at my account, dude. It might be a function of the market and my shitty tweets, but for tens of thousands of followers, only get like a couple, like 10, 20 likes. It's because I post about Nostr a lot. I mean, that's part of the reason. Like, there's a whole algorithmic game you have to play. If you don't play it, you're not going to get any visibility. But like, you can see. But I guess a right to say something is not the same thing as a right to be seen. But I don't think you can just say anything on this platform. We've got people that are banned all the time. We've got what's that guy's name who was kicked off just for saying bring back the guillotine? He was kicked off Twitter. His account was deleted.
I would argue that, like I don't necessarily agree with the shadow banning, but this idea that like everyone gets shadow banned if their tweets aren't being seen, like I'd say over half of these people who are going around like, oh, I've been shadow banned.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't say interesting things, and people don't care to hear you say
right.
things.
Yeah. They're not playing the game right. They're that's
and
absolutely.
I know you acknowledge that too, but like I really want to make a clear point that like the fact of the matter is social media is not, their job is not everyone's post has to be seen by everyone. Theoretically, the argument of freedom of speech on social media is just you should have the right to say it, but beyond that, they shouldn't suppress it, they shouldn't downvote it, the algorithm shouldn't fuck with it.
Even community notes is a little bit of an infraction of this. Like,
I love
I don't hate it, but the problem is your content, like your original, what you wanted to say, is changed. If I append endnotes to a book, that changes the book. That's not exactly freedom of speech. I mean, it's like a rebuttal from like a censoring God. Like it's I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. I'm just saying in the end, you'll never have complete freedom of speech on Twitter. I don't know if that's something people want or not, but this is much like Tesla in the early, like this is a false advertising campaign. Elon's very good at this. I promise, we're supposed to be on Mars right now. The blind people are supposed to be able to see thanks to Neuralink by now. He ought to have cured cancer. He makes a lot of claims that are catchy sound bites, take off in the media. And now people are actually going the other way. Advertisers are leaving Twitter for this quote unquote like freedom of speech stance. And it's just not there. It can never be there, guys. The only alternative to this, Bitcoin, freedom of speech protocol. Nostr, freedom of speech protocol. It's protocols, not platforms. Platforms, especially that are tied up in corporate entities, whether public or private, you're always subject to being disenfranchised by the will of a few. It's not possible for this to be, the freedom zone that you think it is. So I would encourage people that are listening that maybe have never tried Nostr to go over and give it a shot, because it is free. There's no one who can keep you from using the platform and posting whatever you want to post, and your identity and reputation are not, as long as you keep your private key private, you're not subject to get rug pulled here.
So it looks like about 3.5 hours ago, you were having a conversation with Peter Zion, because Peter Zion just sent a tweet out saying, "I'm done with Twitter." And
who the hell is Peter Zion?
He's the guy who goes on Joe Rogan and shits on Bitcoin a lot.
Oh yeah, this guy's dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
I've listened to this guy before.
that's the camp you're arguing for right now. I just want to read you he put I clicked the link. But
I'm not saying, look, I'm not advocating people leave Twitter forever. I'm just saying it's not what you think it is. Go ahead.
I want to break down his reasons, because some of them I think you'll agree with, but I'd like to see if you agree with all of them. Number one is misinformation. The lax content moderation policies have opened the floodgates of disinformation.
The disinformation is not real. That's not a real thing. Like,
let's look at it from his misinformation claim. Do you feel like there's more misinformation on Twitter? Yes or no?
I would have no idea how to even approach that question, because most of what occurs on Twitter is like microblogging. A lot of it's nonsense. A lot of it is kind of insider speak for a small group of people. Like, I would have no idea what people are talking about if you go outside your circle. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't think that matters. Like, the moderation conversation is something completely different. You know what I mean? That's that falls more into the you think you have an inherent right to be seen, right?
Fair. I would argue that, like, the best example of this, and I believe it was Michael Schellenberg writing about it, but over the course of the Gaza, Palestine, Israel conflicts that we've been seeing, there's been a lot of information that comes out, is broadcast, and then we find out like 12 or 24 hours later, like, hey, actually that was bad intel. And the mainstream media companies have been very poor about retractions, very poor about correcting their information. But to the point of content moderation, to the point of misinformation, to the point of these community notes, the community notes have actually been first and quicker in issuing these sort of like corrections, or it's not a redaction because they allow the posts to exist, but they show you, I guess, what the community is responding to this post with, like what the other narrative is, what another perspective is, what the truth is, whatever, however you want to frame it. I do think, though, the tool of community notes, at least in that aspect, is immensely helpful when the other option we have right now is zero accountability.
Is there a question in there?
No, that's just like my statement. You can agree or disagree.
Yeah.
With.
I don't know. Look, I just think my stance is just that I think the expectations that people have are misguided. I think it's silly to have ever thought that the mainstream media, these are just businesses. They don't have your best interest in mind. They don't have any, like, your expectation that what they're telling you is like true and accurate is ridiculous. It's insane. It never will be. It never has been. I also don't think there is some kind of inherent truth in here. This is a little bit more radical stance, I think, but it's just like all of this information, like recreating history through any sort of media, is a fabrication and a fiction in itself. That's not what actually occurred. Like, time passes. You can't claw it back. So you take a bias just by choosing what to cover.
Of course.
Right? That's moderation, and that is what all of these companies are in the business in. So I don't really have different expectations of them. What I'm saying is Twitter can't and never will be freedom of speech, because it's not it's not a freedom open source protocol. It's not distributed. There's no mechanism for users to own their accounts and their data, and you're subject to censorship. Now a censor that chooses not to censor you is still a censor. Just because you're saying and doing the right things doesn't mean that your opinions will always be in vogue. So I'm just pointing out the future risk. I mean, my position is you'll all be disenfranchised in good time. Like the Elon regime is not forever. The narratives that he needs to craft to accomplish his goals are not always going to align with yours. And when you find yourself on the other side of that, especially if you've built like some kind of big following or maybe business off the back of X, is at risk. Like it's a real existential risk for you as a user.
Yeah, I would even challenge you though, those of you listening, those of us talking, Tino, any of us in the Bitcoin space especially, we, I think, kind of know these things to be true. We know the media has alternative incentives. We know how these sort of things have been captured both by regulators as well as just within themselves with the centralized control that we see and sort of the values that a lot of these businesses for some reason decided that they need to push values, almost in the way like the churches were doing 500 years ago. Like that's where we're at. We're at a point where the shift of power, we went 500 years ago, 600 years ago, or I guess the Renaissance was 1400, so 600 years ago. 600 years ago, we saw this almost shift slowly out of religion and then into centralized governments over the course of a couple of centuries. And now we've reached a point where over the last century, I would argue, and then we're really picking up the pace now, we're going from that centralized control out of the government's hands, but this time to like corporations' hands, businesses' hands. Like these are the people, like this is where we're actually absorbing our values from the media companies that we consume from the social media companies that we watch, from the movie and TV studios that create content that we like to absorb, from the food manufacturers that we buy food from. Like they are pushing a value set onto us akin to what we saw government push values onto us for centuries, akin to what we saw religious organizations and groups and churches push forward to citizens centuries before that. So it's like this, it feels like we're reaching a point where it's almost like I hate to say it like this, but it's like a weird natural progression where individuals, society, for some reason a long time ago decided like, I don't want to be in charge of deciding my values. I want someone else to decide them for me. And over the course,
that's always been a trade-off that people have made.
No, of course. But then like as a result, it started with religion, then it changed to government, and now we're at a point where it's literally like Apple is telling you what's good and bad. Like think about that.
Yeah. Wild times, polytheistic culture, people serve a lot of different gods. The state can't really keep up or compete on that level. They're just not competent enough in terms of like media armed vessels. I don't know, man. It's all a psyop. I can't wait for the day you'll know I made it when I just disappear from the internet. Get to a certain number, stop using all this stuff. It's just so incredibly unhealthy.
I deleted Instagram on my phone again, and I like already feel better.
Me too. Yeah, that's great. Well, moving on. I don't want to spend all our time on Elon here. We got about 15 minutes left, and I definitely wanted to cover what's going on with Ocean. So you saw this. I think we were off the day that they actually launched, but Ocean is pretty. Elijah's pool is coming back. This is Luke Dash Jr.'s resurrected mining pool. I guess the core features that are there are coming that are interesting to people is the block templates open, so you can form your own block template, and there's not custody of your funds, so you can get Bitcoin as you mine directly from the Coinbase, like Virgin Bitcoins. They're not held up at a third party or a pool waiting for a payout. The problem is right now this isn't fully implemented as I understand it. So you do actually have to meet a threshold to get a withdrawal, and then I think they pull that withdrawal direct from the Coinbase at the time that you meet it. Anything under that right now, I guess, is technically stuck. But the cool feature is they're going to integrate Lightning. I don't know how technically they're going to do this yet. There's been a lot of debate. This is kind of the curious thing that we'll see, but they're going to integrate Lightning so that you can, I think also there's got to be some kind of custody mechanism there, because I don't know how the channels are opened and closed between pool users to make withdrawals that are sub like 0.01 Bitcoin or whatever. So interestingly, it's marketed as like a decentralized, more ethical pool for people to join. And I think, like I've said in previous shows, there's a lot of miners out there whose first choice for a pool to mine from was Luke's pool back in the day. So the minute they went online, all their hash power actually could just convert. They click a button, it just switches to Ocean, and you're mining from Ocean. It's very simple to set up. Here's the controversial and interesting part, which came out basically over the last day. It turns out that their implementation, if I understand it, does not parse transactions past or like relay them past a certain op return. Basically, it's used as a filtering mechanism to keep inscriptions out of their block template, like inscription transactions. So if you're keeping inscriptions out of your transactions, the users of your pool are forgoing fees. So if Ocean finds a block, you've got a block minus all this opportunity cost of fees that all the ordinal people are using. Obviously, this is kind of it's interesting. It's kind of backwards from the way they, like, the whole premise of Ocean was to be censorship resistant and to further distribute the pools. But if this is the case, if they're doing this, that's moderation. It's censorship. It's a little bit backwards. They're taking an ideological stance, which actually contributes to the cause they're fighting against. Because think about all the pools that are pro inscription and that say, okay, we're not censoring transactions, we're agnostic to you don't even have to be pro inscription, we're just agnostic to that, we don't care, these are fucking Bitcoin transactions. Yeah, we want the fees. Yes, we want those fees that are higher than the fucking block reward. We want that extra 6.578 Bitcoin that we've seen at times. Like, of course, we're a business. So it's very odd to me as a new pool, because you see they're deferring those transactions. The other pools can reliably say, okay, great, this lowers, if Ocean is able to capture a significant amount of hash rate, this lowers their probability of pulling in those blocks, because they're not going to reap those fees. So this is even better for the miners that are agnostic to or even pro inscriptions. It's not a comment on what I think they should do. I just think it's an interesting move, because as a new pool, you have to incentivize people to want to use you. And if off the bat you're starting with a disincentive of where actually you're not going to get these insane fees that the inscribers are, whatever you think, bloating the chain with, like, kind of makes me want to point my hash rate where I'm going to get the most bang for my buck. It's a close margin business. But my curiosity also is, how the hell is Ocean going to get ahead if they're censoring transactions like this? And the only good rebuttal I've gotten to this online, I asked the question. I mean, I'm not trying to start a fight or something, and I don't ideologically care one way or another whether they choose to take inscription transactions or not. The only rebuttal I've gotten is people think that there are so many Bitcoiners out there and miners that are overwhelmingly against inscriptions that they're going to forego those fees willingly, get less money for their hash rate, join Ocean as a form of protest, and grow the pool that way. So they think it's a feature, not a bug. I guess we'll see what happens, but I'm inclined to think, okay, well, now you're not thinking in the adversarial, self-interested way that Bitcoiners are, I guess, historically known for thinking in, because you're getting less bang for your hash rate. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Right now, what do you think about all this, Q? Have you looked into Ocean at all? I'm gonna pull them up
Uh,
and see how many people are using them.
so like I've been following this for a little bit. I think the nuanced details of it to me are a little bit more noise. I think the signal really is kind of like what you described. This is a Bitcoin mining business, so it's not a nonprofit. They are running this for profit, and they are electing to
This is a
ignore.
pool, though.
Well, it's fine. Sorry, it's a mining pool, but it's
Mhm.
everyone who contributes to this pool shares
It's
in the
giving
block.
fees to the
So there is an element of this where, to your point, like you are limiting the maximum amount you can make. To be honest with you, I think this is like the epitome of what a free market needs to look like. Is there
yeah.
needs to be products and businesses for people who are vehemently against ordinals, who genuinely believe the only way to sort of get rid of this spam on the blockchain is to not even participate in the additional block reward that you receive. And there are going to be some people who love this and want this. And I'm sure there will be other people who don't really care and see it as an opportunity to make more money or earn more Bitcoin. And then they will go and find these pools that won't censor those transactions. And we can allow the market, dude, for all we know, in 5 years' time, Brain is the dominant pool because everyone wanted that. Or Brain goes under in 6 months because everyone's like, dude, I can get more fees if I go and link with a different pool. So it is
Mhm.
to me, it's more important rather than to cast judgment on I don't like that business model. This is the free market working in real time. That there are products and businesses that you as a Bitcoiner may not necessarily agree with, want, or need, but it's going to exist in the ecosystem, just like ordinals were. There are plenty of people, who, myself included, were like, "This is kind of dumb. Like
Mhm.
this feels like we're not innovating to grow. We're just kind of like dicking around, waiting for a bull run." If I'm just being completely honest here.
Mhm.
That's my opinion. And there were plenty of people who made a shit ton of money on ordinals, and my hat goes off to you because I wish I did. Like I can own that, but that's the free market. So that's just sort of that's my genuine belief on this.
There's yeah, I hear you there. Again, this isn't this is just an open question. I'm just
Yeah, totally.
curious to see what'll
No,
happen because at the like as of right now, there's 239 petahashes of hash rate pointed to Ocean. I'm a little surprised actually that there's only 15 entities using this pool today, unless their public dashboard is off. There's only 15 contributors. And shout out to the smallest contributor has almost 4,000 terahashes, which is pretty cool. So there's a couple like home miners out there. I'm going to be one of them. This pool did excite me to finally, I've been talking about it for a year and I haven't pulled the trigger. I finally bought miners and I'm finally going to start mining in a couple of weeks when they get here. So I'm super excited about this. But for comparison, 239 petahashes, Ant Pool has 127 exahashes of hash rate. And I don't expect this competition to pop up overnight, but it'll be interesting to see as the I guess the marketing and the users of this pool start to talk about it, how it grows. I mean, I'm really happy for them, and overall, I'm super excited, like you said, to just have a little bit more diversity in the marketplace and give people more options. That was the point of this thing. Is like, hey, you don't want to point at these big four pools. Like, let's start something new. Let's try to distribute this a little more, get more people mining at home, make it as simple as possible, and open up the specs and open up the block template for people to construct their own blocks. So pretty fun stuff. Now we've
I think before we wrap, because I know we got only 5 minutes left before you got to get out of here. I want to
mhm.
talk about FUD going around. Shout out our
Oh,
boy Nick Hoffman for pointing this out, but like literally, like Jack Dorsey, Luke Dasher Jr. And all the guys behind Ocean Mining have their announcement, the silly video of them trying to crack the bottle of champagne, and then within 24 hours, every major media publication and outlet is saying how Bitcoin mining uses too much water. Water. We don't use too much electricity anymore, people. It's now we use too much water. Move that goalpost over just a little bit more, please. It's funny to me, and I'm sure it is to a degree to you, because it's like we see through it. But the uncomfortable truth is, like, I would hear it all the time from normie friends of like, yeah, but Bitcoin uses too much electricity. Like, we can't, like, that's not a sustainable thing. It's like, oh, buddy boy, like, I don't even try to unpack it anymore. And it's very obvious, these attacks and the intent of what these attacks are trying to do to stoke fear in people, fear, uncertainty, doubt. So I say just laugh about it. Let's all go buy a pool. Like who was it? Someone sent a tweet yesterday. I don't remember who, but like the joke was like the bull market of 2020 was we're all getting girlfriends, and the bull market of 2024 is we're all getting pools. I like it. Everyone who's watching, if you have a pool, please tag McShane and I on your favorite social media platform, whether it's Nostr, Twitter, something from Mark Zuckerdick, whatever your heart desires. Tag us in a picture of your pool, or if you feel so kind, feel free to Photoshop us into your pools. No, not your mining pools.
There's some interesting comments from Giacomo right here. So the reason, so right now Ocean is set to go live with Stratum v2 at some point in the future. So that's like the marketing thing, right? Right now they use Knots. Knots by default has like policies in the mempool that exclude, I guess, what the detractors would call spam candidates and inscriptions. And there's another argument out there that I should surface, which is that many of the huge outrageous fees you see for inscriptions, sometimes these are paid off band. So that value wouldn't accrue if you had gone and joined that pro inscription pool anyway. So it might not be like, it would be interesting to compare the numbers between like off band transactions that are paid directly to like a brains or something, versus, you know, what's happening on chain and how the pools extract more value from the spam or inscriptions, as you want to call it. So it's just an interesting tension there at Ocean, between being censorship resistant, but also right now pretty much functioning as like a centralized moderator of transactions. I don't know, excited for him, excited for the future of this, man, and especially for this mining journey I'm about to embark on. So yeah, that's about it for me today.
I think that'll do it. I know you got a meeting. I got a meeting, guys. If you are not, and if there's a single girl out there watching us, please smash that subscribe button. Stop watching it on McShane's Zap.stream. Feel free to hop on over to the Bitcoin Q&A channel. We have our own Nostr. Be sure you're following that. We have a Twitter. Guys, we'll be back tomorrow.
Catch you